So this is Avonelle Hawke's Oral History Part 13. We're still in Omaha and talk about some things that happened in Omaha. First of all, talk about your friends that you had in Omaha.
Well, I'm back again, folks. We always made some nice friends wherever we were. Your dad was very gregarious to a point, and I loved to be around people. So Don and Steffi and their 4 children had arrived in Omaha and rented a house across the airfield from where we were in Bellevue, and they lived in what was called Ralston. And then
You saying that they rented a place before they moved to Ralston, or that was Ralston?
that was Ralston.
They rented a place.
They rented a place.
Okay.
And then our next door neighbors that were moved into, it was a new area. All the lots were being sold at that time and they were all military families. And our next door neighbor had just moved into their new home before we did. And they had 4 kids. And that was the Burlingame family. And they ended up lifelong friends. The children were all either a year apart or exactly the same age as you 3 boys. And there's a little side story about the Burlingames. Their oldest son ended up going to the Naval Academy and graduated and served his 3 years in the Navy and went to flying school, naval flight school, and became a naval pilot. And then he got out after 3 years and went with American Airlines and became a senior pilot with American Airlines. His name was Chick, or Charles Jr. Burlingame. Chick was a typical American kid, just full of energy, just a real aggressive, nice kid. And 9/11 came. And as I say, this is a sidetrack. Years later, 9/11 came. And lo and behold, the senior pilot on the plane that was diverted into the Pentagon was Chick Burlingame. It just broke our hearts. Mike, our older son Mike, actually cried when he saw Chick's picture on television. We have stayed very close. I have stayed very close friends. So has Frank, with Deborah, the only daughter, and she became very involved in working with the 9/11 survivor families, and became really quite deeply involved with it for many years until she said she couldn't deal with it any longer, and she had to bow out for a while. Frank has met with Deborah several times since then, but it was a tragic thing. And she said she was convinced that her brother, who was the head pilot on the plane, had to have been shot in the cockpit because he would have never gone into the Pentagon on his own, even if he was ordered. And so that was a side story about the Burlingames. Out of the Burlingame family, there are two left, Deborah, the daughter, and another son, Mark, who's a physician, a doctor. And she's lost all her family except the one brother. Then we had a bunch of really nice Air Force families around us in this circle. We made friends with our neighbors, the Cundys, the Taylors, your coach in Little League, Brown, what was his first name? Major Brown. And so that's where we were for the 5 years, making friends.
And the Willies?
And the Willies, oh yes, oh I loved Kay Willie. Kay and Herman Willie lived behind the Burlingames, and there were 4 houses in the center of Reed Drive. The Burlingames, the Hawkes, the Willies, and the Korgers. And we all had great big backyards that all joined. And of course your dad had to put up a basketball hoop immediately. Then he put in a very dangerous toy, I had it on the tip of my tongue. What was that thing that you hit against?
Tetherball.
A tetherball. It was absolutely the worst thing we could have done. It was dangerous. And but you kids were, the whole circle played in our backyard, if you remember. Everybody else grew gardens in their backyard. The Hawks grew baseball teams. Who else did we have there?
Talk about Pat Burlingame.
Pat Burlingame, she was a great gal, beautiful girl. She and Chuck were a handsome couple, and we became very good friends. After he retired and became, he went with Toyota in the public relations department, and we visited them and stayed with them in, what is it, Garden Grove near Anaheim, near Disneyland. And they visited us one time, and Pat was a great woman. She absolutely adored her husband and was a great mother. It was just a joy living next door to them.
Didn't she hurt her back one time?
Oh, the hula hoop became a real thing, and then the twist, the dance called the twist. So she was practicing the twist and the hula hoop, and she was cute with a hula hoop in her living room. Knocked her back out for a while. She was not feeling very well. She really was a great mom with those 4 kids. And Deborah has said to me in later years, she said, I remember on Sunday mornings, the Hawks would leave that. Well, she said first the Catholics would leave, the Catholics who worshiped on Sunday. They'd leave first on Sunday morning, and she said then the Methodists would leave, and she said that was you and Babe, and then the Lutherans would leave, and that was the Cundys and the Burlingames. But she used to laugh about that. She said they all met at different times. But Kay Willie was a very close friend. And Kay and Herman Willie had been with us in Africa. And Dad knew Herman, but I had never met Kay until we moved to Omaha. Yeah, and they had 4 kids. One was your age, Chrissy Dissy, and they had a dog, Fritzy, that snipped you. We had a nice neighborhood, a real nice neighborhood.
Well, talk about raising 3 boys at this time. I mean, what was it like? 3 very active,
very
boys.
Competitive boys. Well, number one, your ages had a lot to do with everything that happened. Mike and George were only 22 months apart, and because Kathy died, who was the 3rd one, there was a bigger gap between them and you. And let's see, George was born in 50 and you were born in 54. So that made you 6 years younger than Mike. But that didn't stop you, Frank. You were, and you know your brothers were so good to you. I remember so well. They included you and never told you to get out of the way or go away, we don't want you. You were always right there with them, and they accepted you. But you weren't going to have it any other way. I mean, wherever these 2 brothers went, you were there. Even you had to take discipline at school because you wanted to play in their part of the playground, and your teacher said, no, you had to play here because you were younger. So she'd have to go to the Mike and George's playground and drag you back to your playground. You 3 boys were very close then, but competitive. Oh, it was almost too much. You guys just competed all the time with each other, trying to be on top of things, be the best. And it was interesting raising you 3 boys. Difficult at times, but I just loved having boys, and I knew nothing about them when when Mike was born. Um, Dad had grown up with brothers. He was very knowledgeable, but this was new to me because I had no brothers and sisters. I just went along day by day, and I had the perfect husband. He just knew how to take hold of things, and yet he did it with such, I guess, love, you'd call it. Never with making me feel that I was any less able, but he would just always take care of everything that happened. And believe me, things happened. Those were the years when you were always having accidents. Mike broke his arm playing basketball, had to have it set and had to deal with that. George.
Mike pushed George off some sort of roof or something.
Oh, that was much earlier when they were just tiny, tiny things in Tucson.
Oh, broke his collarbone or something, right?
It cracked it.
George's collarbone.
Yeah.
He pushed him off a shed or something?
Oh, we had a little shed in the backyard at 422 North First. And they both crawled up on the shed, and then Mike pushed George off. He was only 2.5.
Oh, jeez.
And Dad took him out to the hospital and had an x-ray. It was not completely broken, it was just cracked. We didn't have to set it or anything.
So back to Omaha. So Mike breaks his arm.
Mike broke his arm playing. He and George were in the basketball league at the base, and they enjoyed that a lot, and they did very well. One Sunday evening, just at dusk, Mike comes yelling through the front door with pulling you along with his hand, and you have blood coming down your face. Mom and Dad, Frank is hurt. Mom and Dad. Well, you had been sledding in the hill across the street, behind the Cundys. And when you came in, it looked like you'd probably blinded your eye. It was terrible. You looked horrible. And you were just a little guy. I think you were maybe 4 or 5, somewhere around that. And so you were covered with blood because you had cut your ridge above your eye, at your eyebrow, because you had hit an ice bank when you went down on your sled. So Dad grabbed you and said, "I'll be back later," and he took you over to emergency. And the doctor washed you all off, and what it was I forget what they called it. There's a name for it, when you slice.
There's a gash.
There was a gash, no, but it was called something. And he said, "Don't worry," he said, "he's not permanently injured, we can take care of this." So they took care of you, and he brought you home. That was when the polio vaccines were being given, the oral vaccines. And when I took you boys to get yours on the base, George, who was just a little guy.
We talked about this before.
Did we?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was talked about.
So it was broken bones and stitches and everything going on. And, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Looking back on it, what was the biggest challenge, do you recall, raising 3 boys?
Oh, I don't know. I think, and I made the challenge myself because of my personality. Oftentimes we make challenges out of things that other people wouldn't have because of your personality. I'm aware that I've had a personality that doesn't deal well with confrontation and with quarreling. I didn't grow up with any quarreling whatsoever with my mother or with my aunt and uncle. I didn't hear it. I didn't hear confrontation and competition. It wasn't a part of my life. And maybe I was born with this gene, I don't know, but I can't deal with it well. So I always try in any way to avoid it. I I've gotten better about that over the years and become able to respond to it more easily. But I had a very difficult time when you were growing up dealing with your fighting with each other. What I should have done many years before was put all three of you out when you started hitting each other and fighting, and just closing the door and saying, settle it outside. When you're through, you can come in. I learned that from Mildred Hawke's stories about her mother. She did that. She had 4 kids. When they started to fight, she'd say, you can do it outside. When you're through, you can come in. Instead, I tried to get in the middle of it and settle it, which was stupid and difficult. So I really did have a difficult time dealing with my children arguing and fighting. And sometimes it got fist fighting with you boys. I was a mother that tried to see everybody's side of it, and of course that doesn't work. I just didn't want you to kill each other.
Now, you didn't grow up playing sports or being interested in sports, but you married a man who was very interested in sports.
And majoring in it.
And had 3 boys, and what was that like?
Well, that was interesting. I never cared for PE, I never cared for sports. I was an only child who lost her father at 4, so I had no male model whatsoever. My uncle had already raised 2 of his family, and he was gone a lot. So I was not exposed to sports in any way except for recess and PE. So I didn't have a chance to learn how to enjoy them. I just wasn't exposed to them. I was exposed to reading and playing the piano and playing jacks and jump rope. That was about it. Oh, I did have hopscotch and dodgeball and kick the can.
Say, you were a jock?
I was a jock. So when I ended up falling in love with a man with a boy who loved sports, and he majored in it in college. And then my firstborn, my secondborn, and my fourthborn ended up being boys. And I quickly learned earned run averages, how many innings there were in a baseball game. Oh, I got a funny story about that. When we were stationed in Tucson, and you boys were little, Uncle Herb, Babe's dad's uncle, who was a semi-pro, I guess you'd say.
He was pro.
He was a pro ball player, baseball player, and his whole life was wrapped up in baseball. He was living in Tucson at this time, and he took us to High Corbett Field to a Toros. No, what were they called then? Before Toros.
I don't know. I'd have to look it up. This was when was this?
There's probably the 50s.
Okay.
Early 50s.
Go ahead.
He took us to a baseball game one night, and lo and behold, one of the pitchers was George something or other, one of my high school close friends in high school. She had married him. I can't think of his name, but we were sitting there watching, and George was the pitcher, and Uncle Herb, as I say, he was a pro baseball player, makes the side comment to your dad, he's a pretty wild man. And I turned to Uncle Herb, I said, you mean he goes out on his wife? I thought Uncle Herb and Dad were going to fall off of this bench. And I was still dead serious. And Uncle Herb said, haven't you taught her anything yet?
He probably said something like, this pitcher's wild.
Yeah, probably,
This pitcher's wild. Yeah.
This pitcher's wild.
Yeah.
And I said, you mean he goes out on his wife? And that's what wild pitchers were to me. I learned. and I learned to just love sports. I'm a great spectator of sports girl. Um, and Dad was always real patient with me. That was another good quality about your dad. He accepted me just the way I was, even though a lot of times it wasn't the way he was. He loved to play bridge when we got married. He was an excellent bridge player. I was a lousy card player. I had never been around cards or games. And so he thought, well, I'll teach you how to play bridge. And of course, a lot of couples played bridge in our youth and in the service. So he proceeded to teach me very calmly, very patiently how to play bridge. Forget it. I was not at all interested. I tried. I have to honestly tell you, I tried anything Dad wanted me to. I loved him so much, I wanted to do just what he wanted me to do. But to keep track of 4 different sets of cards, hearts, diamonds, clubs, spades, and how many had been played, and how many I had of honors to be able to bid, I thought, what a waste of time. And I didn't take it as, and it isn't, it's a wonderful game. It's a wonderful game. I just wish I had a different attitude. But I learned well enough to be put up with by good friends at a bridge table. And Dad just was a great bridge player. And John Duane was a fabulous bridge player. So, and Steffi enjoyed bridge. She wasn't as great as Don was, but she was good. And so
I mean, the classic image of couples playing bridge is husbands and wives going at each other because, you know,
yeah, no.
Why'd you do that? That was dumb.
And that happened so much. Dad never did that to me. It's amazing because Dad had a temper inside. I knew that. But he never spoke rudely to me. He never got up from the table or was disgusted. We just slowly, gradually stopped playing bridge.
Would you say you played the most in Morocco?
Well, mostly. We found other things to do. Just like Dad, when I got married, Dad played a real good game of golf. He was a very good golfer. He gave it up when we had Mike. Well, really, when we got married. And I said, why aren't you playing golf? He said, honey, I'm married and I have kids and it costs money to play golf and it takes a whole day practically to go out and play 18 holes. And he said, I have other things I want to do now. That was your father. He quit playing. Just like with Shirley and Rufus Livingston. Shirley told me once, she said, on our honeymoon, Rufus went out and played 18 holes of golf with people. She said that was more important.
Now, Dad was an excellent swimmer and a competitive diver. What was your attitude toward swimming?
Oh, I just loved everything he did. We were married June 27th at Randolph Field, beautiful permanent station. And they had a great big swimming pool. And on July 4th, I guess it was traditional, they had a big swimming meet and a diving show, diving exhibition. And Babe was one of the divers who was in the exhibition. And that's the only time after we were married that I saw him do anything like that.
Well, what was your attitude towards swimming?
Oh, well, I couldn't swim. I was scared to death of water. There you are. And Dad never ridiculed me. He tried to teach me when we got a swimming pool. But I was hopeless. Our pool was a regular swimming pool. It was 9 feet at the diving board, and it was 30 feet long. And I remember trying very hard. He'd get me at the 9-foot end under the board, and he'd be right beside me, and he'd have me take off down toward the shallow end. And I would be just fine. I knew the mechanics, and I would be just fine until I ran out of the first breath, and then I just go right to the bottom. I never learned how to breathe in the water.
You just panic.
I panicked.
I I know that feeling. And now, we lived near Omaha, and that's where they have the College World Series. Right? Talk about that.
Oh, we had such fun. Arizona came up at least 3 times, 2 or 3 times out of the 5 years we were there to the World Series. And I think they finished second in one of them. And boy, Dad got all of us ready to go to the games at Rosenblatt Stadium. And he'd pop up a huge bag of popcorn. And we'd take that bag of popcorn and we'd go and sit and watch all the games. And of course, he knew the people in the athletic department, so I have a wonderful picture of you 3 boys holding the Wildcat banner after one of the games, and Dad standing in the picture. And
the entire team is.
The entire team is around it.
Yeah.
And you 3 boys are are right there with the banner. Those were fun times. One year, his fraternity brother George Wickstrom and his wife Bonnie came up from Missouri to see the World Series, and Bruce Knudsen, if you remember that name, and his wife were there, and Bruce's sister Alma and her husband were there, and we always entertained. So we got tamales, and I made beans, and we had a Mexican dinner and had them all at our house.
And did somebody always bring tamales up from Tucson?
I think Alma had.
Okay.
Yeah. So
that was a big deal everywhere we were. Anytime somebody came from Tucson,
we had Mexican food.
and they'd bring tamales.
Yeah, and flour tortillas.
Flour tortillas, that's right.
And flour tortillas.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was the one thing you asked for when they came in the door.
Yeah. And of course, Frank Sandsted, I think, was coaching the team, and Pop McHale would always come, right?
And Dad knew both of them very well.
Right. Yeah. In fact, I think Dad had them come to the underground.
Right. He toured. He hosted the underground to all of them. Right. And Pop McHale, as he came out, turned to Babe and he said, "Well, I don't know, Babe, much about what you've talked about down there, but it was done during the Republican administration, so I know it has to be good."
The 3 boys are in school. What was that like? Did they do well? Did you have parent-teacher meetings? What were those like?
Oh, yes.
What were the teachers saying about the boys at this point?
Well, in Omaha, in Bellevue, it was a little town of Bellevue, and the school was almost completely military children, or children in military families. And when I know this sounds like bragging, but it's the truth, how 2 ordinary people, although your father was not ordinary, he was very, very smart, but how God brought 3 really intelligent, high IQ children through us is amazing. Very ambitious children. And when I went to have conferences in Bellevue, one teacher, and I don't know which one it was Keo Villier and Mrs. Comstock and Mrs. Ellerbrook. I remember the most from that school. One of them made the comment, "Well, you know, most of our students are from military families, and we have found out as we've been teaching them that so many of them at this particular Air Force base come from overseas assignments." And they made the comment to me, they are so much more advanced than the average regular student that you would have, and had so many more experiences by this age that they haven't had, that it's really a pleasure to teach them. And that was a comment about the children from military families. And I was a room mother. It's really funny. I hope I'm correct in remembering this, but you and Frank you and Mike, get your kids straight, never seemed to mind my being room mother. But George, even as a little boy, was kind of embarrassed that he had his mother as room mother.
What did a room mother do?
She was sure that treats were brought on birthdays, just whatever happened extracurricular. On field trips, you were sure they had parent
Permission or chaperone?
chaperones
Chaperone, okay.
on the buses with the kids. Just various things the teacher wanted you to do.
Okay. Help organize kind of the non-academic
Yeah.
life of the class.
Uh-huh.
How many room mothers were there? Was it just one per class?
I don't remember.
And how did you get selected? Did you just,
I don't remember that either.
you don't remember volunteering?
I don't know whether it was voluntary or I don't remember. I'm sure it was voluntary.
And then was there PTA?
Oh yes, and Dad always went with me. Oh yeah.
And so what were the teachers saying about us?
Well, Mike was always a nemesis with the teachers because he was a dreamer and he loved visiting with his neighbor in the classroom and he loved dreaming and looking out of the room. Mrs. Ellerbrook, his 5th grade teacher, said, "I think Mike's the neatest kid." She said, I love boys. But she said, that Mike, she said, I go up and down the aisles as they're working on their homework or on their assignments. And she said, Mike's sitting there with his pencil in his hand looking out the window and just dreaming away. Or he's talking to his neighbor and doesn't have any work done on his paper. And his 3rd grade teachers, when I met her at
Mike wasn't in 3rd grade. He was older than that by now.
well, yeah, but I'm talking about what the teachers always said.
Okay.
And I went up to her desk. It was my turn to talk to her on the first teacher-parent thing. And I said, well, how is my son doing? I'm Mike Hawke's mother. She said, well, I was hoping you could tell me how he's doing. I sure don't know. And I said, what? She was so funny. We had her later for dinner one night. And she said, he has the highest IQ on the IQ test we've given in all of the 3rd grades here. And she said, he doesn't do anything in class.
This is in Morocco?
Uh-huh. But, and that continued. He was intellectually smart and underachiever. Wasn't concerned, didn't care. One time he said to me, oh, a 3 is a good grade. It's a good average grade. I said, yeah, if that's not any better, you can do.
And George, what was the feedback?
Well, he was a perfect student. I have to admit that. All through grade school and junior high and high school. Even in high school, when he stopped working on anything, he couldn't have cared less and was forming a band. He got A's at everything and didn't do much of anything to the other. I don't know how he did it, but he did. And he was an excellent student in grade school and junior high school. But when he started to rebel and wanted to do music and do other things besides school,
and Frank, what was
you were an excellent student. You were an excellent student. Of course, you came along behind George. And I remember Mrs. Comstock saying, he can do everything George does if he just tries. And you were an excellent student. I didn't have to worry about you.
Now, July 4th was a big deal. July 4th was always a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about what we do on July 4th.
In Omaha?
Yeah.
Well, as I say, we lived on a little circle in Reed Drive, and we all had grass in the front. And Dad always got fireworks for you. Always did. Roman candles, especially sparklers. You kids love sparklers. Firecrackers. And so he'd buy a big supply of fireworks. And it seemed like everybody ended up on our front lawn. And I remember one 4th of July, Selma Jones and her kids came up from around the circle. She was a character. Oh, she was a character. And they were doing the sparklers, and it was Selma or one of her kids got burned on the skin from one of the sparks. What else do I remember from that? It was no big deal. It was taken care of right away. It was just a lot of fun.
You got at one point during this time, you got a speeding ticket, I think. Talk about that.
We don't need to talk about things like that.
Oh, yes, we do. This is required.
Well, this particular time, we're getting ready to go camping, and I'm trying to get everything done, ready to leave the next day. And I'm in a hurry, and I had taken you boys, as I always did, to the library. And it was a little library in the little town of Bellevue, so we could get books. George had to have books because he hated to fish, so he'd sit in the boat and read while everybody fished. So I was on the way home down Calhoun Street toward Reed Drive, and I was in a hurry because it was dinner time. And I wanted to get home and start dinner, and you three boys are in the back seat. And I went over the speed limit trying to get home to start dinner, and I get pulled over by the police. And of course you kids are all excited. Oh, what fun. And I'm scared to death. I felt, I was very acquiescent to authority. And is that a good way to put it? I don't know.
Fair enough. Yeah. And we all anybody who gets pulled over by a cop gets a little bit,
yeah, shaky.
Upset and nervous.
I didn't have any pot hidden in the car or anything.
That you knew of.
That I knew of. So you kids are hanging over the back seat, over the seat, looking at the policeman and wondering what's going on, and he's giving me a ticket for speeding. And I start to kind of cry because I'm kind of shaken, and I'm in a hurry, and so tears were coming in my eyes. And Mike speaks up and he says, "Oh, Mom does this every time." My son.
Now, at this time, you're cooking breakfast for us kids, right? And Dad in the morning. Now, did he get up and leave before we got up, or did we all get up together?
We all kind of got up at the same time.
Right. And so
although he left earlier than he had to be at the mouth of the underground, the tunnel, and in his office by 7.
Okay, well, so he was getting up early then. Yeah.
So he definitely was earlier.
And so we kids, and typically what would you fix us for breakfast, like in the summertime or in the wintertime?
Well, in the winter you had hot breakfast, oatmeal. The pancakes were on the weekend. Dad made them.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Oatmeal, eggs, bacon. Always, you kids, I wonder what it did to your health. You kids always had a tall 6 or 8 ounce glass of orange juice every morning. I bought that frozen Minute Maid, and you kids would have a glass of orange juice. And in the summer it was usually cornflakes, Raisin Bran, cold cereal, and orange juice.
And then we'd head off to school.
And you'd head off to school on your bicycles.
Right. And then what would you do in the morning?
Clean house, write my grocery list, go to the commissary, wash clothes, iron clothes, fold clothes, make the beds.
Then did we come home for lunch?
Yes.
And what would we have for lunch?
Sandwiches usually.
Okay. And then back to school. And then in the afternoon, what would you do?
I would cook, start thinking about dinner and preparing dinner, or doing my ironing, or folding my clothes, or having a cup of coffee with Pat next door.
Would you sit down and play the piano?
Very seldom. I didn't do much with my music until I started playing at the church in Bellevue.
Did you ever have a radio on, watch TV?
No,
watch the
I didn't
soaps?
do either one. What I did do the first year or 2 years we were there was set up the card table in front of the TV after Mike and George left for school. You weren't at school yet. And you used to watch Ding Dong School, and you used to play with putty, with that Play-Doh.
Play-Doh.
And you used to, you had a lot of things you did at the card table in front of the TV with the kids show.
Now, what were the things we had for dinner? What would you fix?
We had usually meatloaf once a week. I always had a pot roast or a roast beef on Sunday. We had fried chicken every week. We had pork chops. What else did I make? Spaghetti. I made spaghetti.
Stuffed peppers?
What? Oh yes, I made stuffed peppers every week, seemed like. There was a variety.
Corned beef?
Yes, I learned to make corned beef and cabbage.
And then what would usually go with the meal?
I always had a potato, because Dad and I both love potatoes of some sort, all kinds of potatoes. I always had a vegetable. Dad only liked canned peas and canned corn, but I always fixed asparagus because I loved it. He didn't even want me to cook Brussels sprouts when he was home. He didn't like the smell. I tried to cook a variety of vegetables that would pass the smell test for Dad. And then I always had a salad of some sort. A lot of times Jello salad with fruit in it, bananas. I had a green salad, Jello salad that Mom had that was delicious, that everybody liked. It had pineapple and nuts and all sorts of good stuff in it. And always had home dessert, either cake or pie. And we always had a roll.
Yeah, bread or rolls, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah. The cooking division of labor. So during the week, and Dad would eat at the base, eat lunch at the base?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. He never came home for lunch.
Okay. So this is during the kind of the week. Now what was the weekend like? Was there a division of labor when it came to
Well, the weekend was like, and Dad sometimes had to work weekends, but when he usually was home, he would fix hot cakes and bacon, and they were good. And that was about it.
Biscuits? You make biscuits?
Yeah, oh yes, biscuits. He liked biscuits. He made biscuits out of Bisquick.
Right.
And Dad was really involved in his family when he was home.
Now I remember at this time that you were both smoking
Yes,
cigarettes.
unfortunately. Well,
Let me finish.
no. Well, yes, you would remember that because I started smoking again when Steffi and I were playing bridge with Don and Dad.
Okay, you say you started smoking again.
Yes, I started smoking in college.
Okay, let's start. Okay.
I would really like not to discuss this because I'm not proud of it.
Well, when did you start smoking?
Trying to think. Not when I started college because Sarah, my best friend, started smoking when we started college. And I remember crying and saying, "You didn't," because I thought it was so terrible. Sarah's mother smoked. And the reason I mention that is that she's the one that taught me to smoke.
Sarah's mother.
Sarah's mother. Can you believe that?
This is great. Okay, so this is when about?
Probably around the end of my sophomore year
Okay.
in college.
Okay. because you and Dad were broken up.
Yeah.
Now, you did not smoke at home.
Oh, I would have never smoked in front of any of our families.
So you would smoke on campus, or?
Yes.
But did you think that Anna didn't know?
I didn't think, I just knew I didn't want her to see me smoke. Obviously she knew, she could smell it. And if she ever looked in my purse, she saw them.
What brand of cigarettes did you smoke?
I don't remember.
Were they filtered?
Were they what?
Filtered.
No.
Wow.
Probably Lucky Strike or Chesterfield or something like
Without
that.
a filter. Wow.
They didn't do much of that when I
That's
started.
heavy duty. So how long in college did you smoke?
Well, I was still smoking when Dad and I got married in '47.
Okay.
And I smoked for 3 months after we were married, and then I quit because I got pregnant. And somehow I knew, even though then they didn't talk about it, somehow I knew that was not a good thing for me to do.
Interesting.
As a pregnant woman. Isn't that funny? I somehow knew that.
Well, it makes, yeah. And so when you saw Dad again after the war, you got together, was he smoking at that time?
Oh yeah, we both were.
Okay. He'd learned to smoke in the military, I guess.
Right.
Okay, so you kind of discovered you both smoked.
Yeah.
Got back together again. So was that kind of part of your ritual now, as you're together again? You kind of have a cigarette together, or?
We didn't even think about it.
Mm-hmm.
We just, if we had coffee in the morning, we'd have a cigarette. If we went out for dinner, we'd have one afterwards with dessert. I'm not very proud of that because I have to give myself an excuse. In those days, we didn't know how dangerous it
No,
was.
of course not. And everybody smoked.
Oh gosh, isn't that the truth?
Mm-hmm.
It just seemed the thing to do at the sorority house. When I would go into her practice room, 4 or 5 of us would be in there singing Andrew's Sisters arrangements and smoking our cigarettes. I look back on it and I thought, how foolish.
Yeah.
But that was probably my one vice. I didn't drink. I never tasted alcohol until after I was married.
We'll get to that later.
But yeah.
And smoking was basically allowed everywhere, right?
What?
Smoking was allowed everywhere, basically,
Oh,
right?
no. You won't believe this. The Dean of Women did not allow women on the campus to smoke outside the buildings. You had to smoke in the lobbies of the buildings. And now it's just the opposite if you smoke. You have to get away from the buildings. So no, you were not allowed to smoke inside the buildings or outside the building. Number one, the Dean of Women said you couldn't wear shorts or slacks. You had to wear skirts or dresses on campus. And you couldn't smoke on campus in public.
Okay. And but Uncle Maynard smoked cigars, but did he smoke in the house?
Not in the house.
Okay.
And I said that was a no-no.
And were you aware that Everett and Clyde smoked? Did they smoke?
Oh yes. Oh,
Okay.
Everett didn't smoke.
But Clyde did.
So Clyde did.
Clyde the doctor did.
The doctor did.
But he was never allowed to smoke in the house, I assume.
Oh, I think
in Anna's house.
I never heard her tell him no, but I don't think he did just on his own.
Yeah.
And Marge, his wife, smoked.
Okay. Everybody smoked.
Oh gosh, yes.
So you quit when you got pregnant with Mike, but Dad continued to smoke?
Yes, he smoked different things. He went from cigarettes to cigars.
About when did that happen?
I don't know, but it was in Bellevue. He loved a good cigar. Dad just loved to smoke a cigar. And then he'd go from a cigar to a pipe. And yeah, I can remember some of the pipe smoke smelled so good. But I hated those cigars. I hated them.
Now, I'm sure he wasn't permitted to smoke in the underground.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I never even thought about that.
So in Bellevue, would he come home, would he light up a cigar when he got home? Do you remember?
Where?
when he got home in Bellevue, he'd come home from work. Would he light up a cigar? Generally speaking, every day.
I think after dinner once in a while. I don't remember it as being a constant.
Pervasive. Yeah.
I do remember something funny about that. During our time living in Bellevue, I had quit smoking. We were in Bellevue from 58 to 63. I had quit smoking in 62.
You quit smoking the second time? Okay.
And so Dad was the only one smoking at the point that I'm going to tell you about. But it was either for Father's Day or something. I bought him a box of real good, expensive cigars. Excuse me. And I remember it was at dinner time. I handed them to him. And I said, happy whatever it was. I think it was Father's Day. And he took them and he just put them down on the table and looked at me and got the funniest smile on his face. And he said, that's how much you pay attention to me, honey. I quit smoking 2 weeks ago. I'll never forget that. I was so embarrassed. So embarrassed.
But you had quit smoking when you got pregnant with Mike. But then when did and why did you start smoking again?
Well, I didn't smoke when I got pregnant with Mike. That was in 1947, and it was no problem. I just threw the cigarettes away and didn't smoke again. Period. I didn't anguish. I just said that's it, and I didn't start smoking until we were in Africa, in Morocco, and we were playing bridge with Don and Steffi, and that would have been between 55 and 58. Steffi only smoked, oddly enough, when she played bridge. You never saw her smoke any other time. And we were playing bridge one night. They were the only ones we played bridge with, back and forth at our house. They put up with me. So they were over, or we were at their house, or I don't remember which. And we were playing bridge, and she lit up a cigarette. And she said, have one, Avonelle. I said, no, I quit a long time ago. No, come on and have one. But she kept picking at me and urging me. And I gave in finally. I said, oh, all right.
Now, Don was smoking also?
What?
Don was also smoking?
Yes, and so was Dad.
So you the only person not smoking?
No, I was the only one not smoking. Dad and John were too. And that's when I started again. And I smoked until 1962.
And how much would you say you smoked a day?
I don't remember. I don't remember.
And do you remember what you smoked? What brand?
Well, just a Camel or whatever.
And did you and Dad smoke the same brand? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
And then what made you quit the second time?
Grandma and Grandpa, Hawke, they were coming to visit us. When was the Cuban crisis? What
62,
year?
October.
They were coming to visit us that week that the crisis happened. Before they came, I sat down with myself, and I just loved them so much. And I respected them so much. And they thought women smoking was just a no-no. She didn't look like a lady. Well, my aunt and uncle felt that way too.
It was a generational thing.
Yeah, that it was.
You were a bad girl.
Well, you just didn't look like a lady with a cigarette in your hand. So I sat there one day by myself before they came, and I said, Avonelle, are you going to smoke in front of Mom and Dad?
Had you ever smoked in front of them before?
Oh, heavens no.
Okay.
I had never smoked in front of any of my family, except my old family and friends. And I toyed with Do I quit or do I just go ahead and smoke in front of them? Are you going to be a hypocrite? I kept thinking of being a hypocrite.
Right.
Are you going to be a hypocrite and not smoke in front of them but keep smoking? What are you going to do? Well, I decided I didn't like the word hypocrite. And I decided that I guessed I'd have to quit. So I threw the pack, I remember so well, threw the pack of cigarettes that was on the sink in the garbage. And I said, that's the last cigarette I'm going to ever have. And I quit that day. And it was no time at all before they arrived, a day or two before they arrived. And it was an absolute delight to have my clothes closet free of cigarette smoke again, to have my hair free of smoke, smelling like smoke, and I've never had any since.
So the first time you quit cold turkey, it wasn't a problem.
Uh-huh.
Was it a problem this time? Did you have any withdrawals?
No, I just quit and that was it.
Now, Dad continued smoking in this time. Did he smoke in front of his parents?
Oh yes, the boys.
For a man, it was okay.
It was okay for a man to smoke, but not for a woman.
Did Grandpa smoke?
Oh yes.
Oh, okay. So it was so it was a misogyny thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, the men smoked. Uncle Herb smoked.
Okay. All right.
Tom smoked.
Uh-huh.
I don't think George ever smoked. His brother George. I never saw him with a cigarette.
Okay.
And Tom quit smoking when he married Estelle. She said she would not stand for it. Good for her. And
Now let's talk about drinking. I know you never drank a lot. And drinking
well,
was
I
never
never
a part
drank.
of it.
I never even tasted liquor until after we were married. Dad drank beer occasionally. He'd have a scotch and soda with dinner when we went out. He drank very little at that time. He taught me how to drink. We never drank very much. He said, if you're going to have a drink, honey, drink scotch and soda. I don't know why he thought that was better than anything else. And then he said, and we only drank beer when we had Mexican food. We didn't drink much.
I remember Dad making martinis.
That was later.
That was in Tucson. Is that in Tucson?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. I never liked whiskey. Oh. I really didn't enjoy drinking.
So, there was a part of you. Would Dad have a drink every day when he came home, or?
Well, George swears up now he had a drink every night when he came home, and that's not true at all. It may have appeared that way to a young boy. We had him often. Often he'd come home and he'd mix a drink, and George was always fascinated with that seltzer
Bottle. Yeah.
bottle.
That was a beautiful looking bottle.
Yeah, it was a beautiful bottle. And he'd make us a scotch and soda usually, and hand me one, and we'd have a drink before dinner. Yeah. And then one day when he came home, that was in Tucson. But you asked about drinking.
Yeah, let's continue talking about drinking, even in Tucson. Yeah.
One day when he came home from the base, I said to him, honey, would it bother you if I just didn't have a drink with you when you come home at night? I said, I'm not telling you have to stop, but when you decide to have a drink, I'd just as soon have a ginger ale or a Coke. And he said, gosh, no. He said, it wouldn't bother me at all. And so that's when I stopped drinking. And the reason behind that was, at that particular time, I thought to myself, I'm beginning to teach my children not to start drinking, and that nobody knows if they're going to be an alcoholic or not, and that there was a danger there, because Uncle Herb was one. And here I am teaching my children not to drink, and I'm having a drink in front of them. How stupid is that? And it just all of a sudden came full blown in front of me, you're doing the wrong thing. So that was the day that I decided it's more important that I give it a right impression to my children.
Now, did you mention all of this reasoning to Dad
No,
at
no,
the time? Because you didn't want to seem to be preachy, or?
No, I just said, would it bother you if I didn't have a drink anymore?
At that time, I recall he was making martinis when he came home. Is that
What?
right? He was making himself martinis
Once in a while.
when he would come home from the base.
I don't know whether he stopped making those and just had a scotch or so. I don't know. I don't remember.
At one point, the Tom Hawks came to visit us.
In Omaha.
Yeah.
Yes.
Talk about that.
That was a great 2 weeks. Estelle wrote and said that Tom was going to be going to his 2-week active duty commitment to the Army at Fort Leavenworth. And I think it was at Fort Leavenworth. And Kansas. And she and the children would love to come and spend the 2 weeks with us, and he would come on the weekend to be there with us. And we said, of course, that would be just wonderful. We were really excited about it. And so when the time came, they arrived with their 4 children. Years and years and years later, Estelle said, how did I ever think of doing such a thing to you and Babe? She said, we drove up to your house and we looked at it, and of course it looked like a little Cracker Jack, but you didn't, Cracker Box, but you didn't know that there was this full basement downstairs. And she said, we drove up and I looked at the house and I thought, we're coming in there 6 people. But she said, you made room for us. The kids were downstairs and you were downstairs, we slept downstairs. And Tom and I took your bedroom and the kids all scattered all over. And she said, we stayed 2 weeks. And Tom came home during the weekend and we had great big dinners and enjoyed. We just had a wonderful time.
There was a strawberry incident.
Oh gosh.
L'affaire strawberry.
We all love strawberry shortcake. And I made it real often in the summer during strawberry season. And Babe and Tom both loved it, as did we too. So I would make a big bowl, you know that Pyrex bowl that you have? I would make that full of, I don't know, 3 or 4 boxes of strawberries, sliced and sugared down, to have strawberry shortcake for dessert on the weekend when Tom would be there. So I did, and came time for dessert, got the strawberries out. Fortunately, for some reason, I tasted the strawberries. I don't know why, I guess I just wanted some. And they had been salted down. I don't know how much salt had been poured on those strawberries, but they were salty. They were ruined. And we knew it had to be you kids, and not a one of you would fess up. I still to this day don't know who engineered it. I know you all were probably in on it, but I don't know who engineered it. But Tom, of all of us, blew up. He was the one that really blew up about it. And he was just furious with you kids. Oh, he was so angry. Really reamed you out about it. Yeah, that was not fun.
And none of us snitched?
No, not a one of you.
So how did salt get on the strawberries?
Well, you boys put it on.
Oh, you hadn't put anything on them.
What?
But you said you put sugar on them.
Oh yeah, well, the salt overpowered the sugar, believe me.
Oh, so you put sugar on them already, and then somebody came by and put salt on them.
Exactly.
Oh.
Poured salt on it. I don't know how much.
Oh, okay. And then George was playing Little League Baseball, and we all went to one of his games, and something bad happened.
Well,
George's baseball game.
A ball was hit in the game, and it flew over to the stands and whacked Carol Ann. Oh, it hit her in the head. Yeah, we were scared. Fortunately, no permanent damage, but that was not fun. I remember Estelle going to the commissary with me during that time, grocery shopping. We just hung out around the house, and you kids played.
Now you mentioned the commissary a lot in these interviews.
They had a great commissary.
And also the BX.
Uh-huh.
Okay, what's a commissary and what's a BX?
Well, a commissary is a grocery store, a military grocery store. With the food is cheaper there, but it's good food, commissary. And the BX is a department store, military department store.
Only military people could have access to it?
Anybody who's stationed on their base or has a military ID.
And were things less expensive?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, okay.
At that time, I don't know today whether it is or not.
Uh-huh. But do you know why? Was it because they weren't really interested in making a profit, or was it, did you pay tax? There was no tax?
We didn't pay tax.
Uh-huh.
It was on military grounds, federal ground. And it seemed like they cut down the prices. They carried good quality. They carried appliances, they carried everything. You could order things through there. Mm-hmm.
So did we go like shopping for clothes, back to school clothes and things
Yeah,
like that?
but we did that. We didn't use the BX for that. They didn't have a wide enough selection. Well, we took you to Crossroads, which was a huge shopping center in Omaha.
Okay. And then one time we went to a place called Axar Ben, I remember.
Well, we were there almost the whole 5 years before I knew what Axar Ben was. But it was Nebraska backwards. And it was a big social business organization, kind of like the Tucson Chamber of Commerce. So one New Year's Eve, Dad decided that he'd take all of us to a hockey game, ice hockey game there for New Year's Eve. And afterwards, they were going to let the spectators come down and ice skate. So he was going to see if we could now ice skate. Oh, gee. We went down and had fun watching the ice hockey game. And then, of course, they opened the arena up to all the spectators. But they didn't do anything to smooth the ice after the ice hockey game. So it was not the smoothest ice in the world. And I had never had ice skates on in my life. I couldn't even roller skate. Well, that was an interesting night. We were all on our backsides, including your father.
Yeah, I don't think he had any special ice skating skills.
None of us could ice skate.
I remember falling frequently.
Yeah, that was interesting. But Dad wanted to expose us to it.
One last thing, and then we'll end. But I'm going to circle back to something you talked about last time. When not long after you arrived, the wife of Dad's commanding officer, Okie Snodgrass, had invited you to a tea or coffee at her house to meet some of the other wives, and that you had politely declined because you were busy with your children. And and then Colonel Snodgrass later on had supported you and said that was fine, you did the right thing. But around that, before you told her no, or right after, did you discuss this with Dad at any time?
We really didn't discuss it. Dad was interesting. He never told me, you can do this, but you can't do that. Never. And of course, as a result, I never tried to tell him what he could do and couldn't do. We worked things out real well that way. Dad, I never heard him say, you can't do this.
But at the time, did you think, gee, if I say no, it might hurt him at the office, or might get back to
No.
That was never even a consideration.
Dad once told me, if I can't make my way in my job, on my own, then I'm not worth anything. He says, whatever I make is on my own. I don't have to have someone sidling up to my boss or helping me. I'll do my job and I'll go forward as my bosses think I'm worthy. That was just his attitude. Number one, I hated bridge. And number two, Wives Club revolved a lot around their bridge day, but they had other activities. They had a thrift shop. They had a number of other activities. Frank, I wasn't interested in that kind of stuff. If I was going to spend time away from home, it was going to be my music. But I don't know where women found the time. I don't know. I wasn't that capable.
Well, maybe they didn't have 3 young children.
Well, I'm sure some of them did. And not all of them were in the Wives Club. I wasn't the only one.
Well, this has been great.
Mm.
You're amazing.
No, I'm not.
Your memory's incredible. Can't believe it. Your stamina's amazing. And we'll talk again later.
You know what? You ask me things I don't even like to talk about.
Well, but people like to hear about it.
Oh.
So, love you.
I love you more.